Yeah.
You know, because they hadn't a choice. They went to school in Spanish, so their literary language was Spanish. But for us that grew up learning Catalan at school and everything is in Catalan at school, I never felt that I was making a choice. I mean, I always felt that it was the normal thing to do because Catalan was my first written language.
Okay.
I mean, when I was living in Morocco, I went to school for about a year, but I couldn't have enough Arabic to write in that language. And then when we moved to Catalonia, I just learned the language. I didn't know it was Catalan actually, and then some months later, I realized that I had to learn another language, which was Spanish, because most of the children that went to that school were from families from other parts of Spain, so they were using Spanish. So for me, it's such a natural thing to, to speak. If you come for dinner to our house, nobody understands anything because I would be talking in a masjid with my mother. That's because I never stopped talking in my mother language with her. And then in Catalan with my son, because I grew up in Catalonia, so that's my language. And then in Spanish with my brothers and sister, because we used to use Spanish at the playground, and I just we just changed, and it's funnier because my brother he has a daughter, and he speaks in Catalan with her, and then with us he speaks in Spanish, and now we have a Czech au pair that speaks English. And
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, but I never thought that Catalan wasn't a language for And then I after learning the language, I started reading a lot in Catalan because it was the easiest thing to do. So my written language was mainly Catalan.
That's really interesting. One of the questions I want to ask you, and it's sort of an impossible question to answer probably, but it seems to me that these are the very different cultures, the Moroccan culture and with Arabic as its language, and then the life in Barcelona and the Western values and everything. The Catalan might seem to afford you a certain freedom to express things that you might not otherwise have been able to express if you were an Arabic writer.
It's not the thing that I'm Arabic or not, or I'm Moroccan or not, because there's been writers in Morocco that they have books that they said things tougher. Can we say tougher? Tougher than me.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you have one. You have Driss Schreiber, for example, that has a story about the father, which is like, wow. For me, it's so tough, and I wrote that book.
Right.
But then I think the most important thing for me is that my mother cannot read what I write. So that makes me just forget about that, because the last book I published, it's about feminine sexuality, and it's called The Body Hunter, or Hunter of Bodies or something.
Yeah, Body Hunter.
Body Hunter. So I just don't have to think about that. That's the bad thing is there's always somebody that's gonna tell her what's the book about. And then in the worst way, because it's not in a literary way, it's in the literal way, and it's not. But I guess I had more freedom in Catalonia, but we never know. I mean, I have cousins living in Morocco that I'm not saying that it's better to, you know, having growing up in Morocco than in Catalonia, but it's just something that I don't know. In Morocco, it changes a lot. I mean, it's not the same if you're growing at the countryside in, you know, a very traditional family, or in a city like Casablanca. I mean, the first, you know, like forbidden things I've done, it wasn't in Catalonia, it was in Morocco. The first cigarette I smoked was with my cousins in Morocco during the prayer time, where all the men in the family went to pray, and then we yeah.
So since Catalan was the language that was your first written language, and you wrote a lot of Catalan literature, which, I mean, a lot of Catalan writers are translated into Spanish and vice versa, but are there particular Catalan authors that you're influenced by, or that you...
Yeah, one of my, you know, favorite authors was Marcelo Figueras.
We published.
Yeah. You published?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
really?
English, yeah.
And, you know, when I first read her novels, I was like, wow, it was like I was entering in a Catalan house. A very particular Catalan house, because she had, you know, there was so many things happening in those houses in Marcelo Figueras' books. But I felt so close to her, because she had this domestic environment as the scene of the, you know, the dramas and the tragedies and the action, and that was very reconciliating for me, because I knew that in domestic places there's also in houses there's also a lot of things going on, and it's not just in the public space that's important.
Yeah.
You know, because I grew up in this separation between men and women, yeah, it was. It was quite interesting. It was quite interesting for me to, you know, to meet her books, to find her books, because I thought that Catalans never had these problems inside their houses. It was us that, you know, we had family problems and.
Right, Catalans have family problems too. Your book, and structurally, it doesn't exactly remind me of it, but in some ways, the parts I've read of Last Patriarch do seem to bring to mind Broken Mirror, which I don't know what that is in Catalan.
Yeah, Broken Mirror.
Yeah, where it's like the disintegration of
That's
family.
my favorite book.
That's an amazing book, yes.
It's a perfect one. I mean, the structure is just perfect. There's nothing. I mean, the whole world in a book.
Yes.
You don't need anything else to understand what's happening in there. You just read, and yeah, it's amazing.
It really is. So, is there any other authors that you'd recommend, or people that you'd say had an influence on you?
I would recommend, you know, Pericles. You mean from Catalan?
Doesn't matter from me.
I've been reading from, you know, different traditions, and the one I liked a lot was Naguib Mahfouz.
Oh yes, yeah.
I also read a lot of, you know, Moroccans or North African writers that write in French, like the one I told you, Driss Raili.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of things to read.
Yes, there are. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next is Carsten Jensen, whose We the Drowned is the subject of tonight's conversation mainly. This was originally published in Denmark in 2006 and has been translated from the Danish by Charlotte Bardslin and Emma Ryder. Now, first and foremost, okay, I'll start. I'll read my thing, even though it sounds a little hard. So, Danish author Carsten Jensen is first and foremost known for his journalistic work, starting with his writing career as a literary critic at Politiken.
And that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I know, but I want to lead in. So he went on to write, I Have Seen the World Begin, travels through China, Cambodia, and Vietnam, which, according to the Library Journal, because this was translated into English back in 2003 maybe, is a combination of quote-unquote personal observations, interactions, historical perspectives, political analysis, and self-examination, which is a lot of stuff, which so Jensen won Denmark's Golden Laurels Award, the best book of the year, for that book, which is available in English in Barbara Haviland's translation. Now, when We the Drowned came out in 2006, it won Denmark's most important literary prize and was selected by readers of a major newspaper as the best Danish novel of the past 25 years. The seafaring novel story spans 100 years and tells of nothing less than Denmark's sort of entry into the modern world. Now, to put a finer point on it, we had to run a review on 3%, the website that's associated with the university and with Open Letter, by Kyle, K.E. Summel, who really grew up in Rochester and now lives in D.C. So here's his description, which I think is pretty brilliant, so I'm going to read it. When We the Drowned, Jensen gives us the big story. The inhabitants of the town of Marstal on the island of Ero have been seafarers for generations. They live and die by the code of the sea. Jensen writes in the communal first-person plural with this distinctive and authoritative we, lending a familiar sense of intimacy, and starts his story in the year 1848. Like the docent in a fine museum, he then leads us through the next 100 years in Marstal's history. That history is extraordinarily rich. It includes Denmark's 3 Years' War from 48 to 51 with the Germans, 2 world wars, the rise of late capitalism, and concomitant descent of the very lifeblood of Marstalers' lives, the sailing industry, and finally the ascendancy of globalization, though the G word is not used. This is part of the review still. Whew, that's sure a lot. And yet, though We the Drowned explores a wide range of territory, it's actually compact in the way that Jensen can make it, that only Jensen can make it. A lot of ground, and yes, water is covered, but Jensen builds an impressive edifice out of the Marstalers' lives. What happened to them, we could say, happened to all of us. I'd like to, I think it would be good if everyone to hear part of your
back
journey.
Which place in the war between Denmark and Germany back in the mid-19th century. And this is sailors from Marstal who have been drafted for this war, and they are on a man of war, and they have absolutely no experience with war. So they have a lot of experience with the sea and been through a lot of things, but when it comes to war, they're completely innocent. And for them it is a kind of childish nature, and they take victory for granted. And here comes then a very, very severe lesson in what war is really like. And they are sailing into a fjord on a big man of war, and there's just some batteries on the shore, but these batteries turn out to be very, very effective and completely destroy the Danish men of war. The first hit cleared our aft deck of 11 men. We'd been calling the cannonballs grey peas, but the thing that shot low across the deck, tearing rail, cannon ports and people apart in a shower of wooden splinters, was no pea. Einar saw its approach and registered every meter of its journey as it swept across the deck, shearing the legs of one man and sending them flying in one direction while the rest of him went in another. It sliced off a shoulder here and smashed a skull there. It was hurtling toward him with bone splinters, blood and hair stuck to it. He let himself fall backward and saw it shoot past. He later said that it took off his bootlaces in passing. That's how close it came before it tore out through the quarterdeck aft. To Einar, that cannonball was a monster with a will of its own. It showed him what war was, not a battery that exploded and sent matchstick soldiers fleeing, but a dragon that breathed hot fire on his naked heart. The deck was in chaos. A wild-eyed officer screamed at him to go to the mast with a helmsman and a soldier. The order made no sense, but he did as he was told. The soldier collapsed straight away in a pool of blood. It looked as if he'd imploded. A hole had opened in his chest and blood gushed out. Einar saw a man's eye explode into a red mess and another man's skull torn off. That was a strange sight. Pink brain, matter exposed, and splattered as if it were porridge and someone had slammed a wooden spoon into it. Einar had not known that such things could happen to human beings. Then a second cannonball struck and killed the lieutenant. As he witnessed Armageddon, Einar went hot and cold